when I was a part of the Oregon Trucking Association before moving out here, I was often came across drivers, owner operators, even small and larger fleets sort of not understanding what these trucking associations do for them. And obviously they're not spending the time emailing legislation or complaining about certain things. They're not going on Capitol to comment on bills and stuff being passed and so much more. What does it mean to be a member of the PMTA? And, how does the organization help trucking companies?
Sure. Well, we have about a little over 1,200 members right now in Pennsylvania. And those are trucking companies, small and large, all the way from, single owner operators all the way up to the biggest companies in the nation. And we also have a lot, I think at PMTA, we actually have a lot of small businesses. So think of your businesses that drive trucks, but aren't necessarily thought of as trucking companies. Yep. And we have a lot of those in our membership as well. But then, of course, we also have the companies that support trucking. Even if they aren't trucking companies proper, they sell products, services, like CNS, to our members and to trucking companies in the state. So those are also members of ours. And what we do is sort of a three-pronged approach. We have our legislation and regulatory area where we promote policies that are going to lead to success in the trucking industry here in Pennsylvania, and we'll probably get into some of those here during our discussion. So regulations and legislation. And like you said, your typical trucking company owner doesn't have time to go, sit up on the hill and listen to hearings all day. So we kind of keep monitoring that and let everybody know what things are happening up on Capitol Hill. So that's the first part. The second part is networking. We actually try to promote networking amongst our companies so that you can stay up to date in the latest news and information in the industry and the latest products and all those types of things. So networking is a big part of what we do. And lastly, but not least, certainly, is safety. We promote safety and in two ways, actually. We're happy to take safety questions, promote safety products, and we have a safety day where it's a big focus of what we do every year, and answer safety questions. Safety is a big part of what we do. We have a safety management council that meets on safety issues continuously. But the last thing, or the second part of the safety aspect, is we actually try to teach the public how to drive safely around big trucks too, which I think is a very important thing that's kind of lacking right now in education. So we have a road team, and we try to promote public information that talks about no zones and following distance and all those things that help drivers out on the road understand how to drive safely around big trucks. So
and that's why we titled the podcast "Caution Wide Right." It's exactly that same sign, same imagery, and I think that's fascinating because obviously, what's the statistic that 70% of crashes involving a commercial motor vehicle is not caused by the truck; it's caused by the everyday driver. Yeah. So
right. So we do what we can to try to head that off.
Yeah, and I know, it's always, I think owners, trucking companies, no matter what size, you got to go check out and go on to your state capitol and actually be involved with your organization to talk with legislation and legislators, get in part of that process, because just seeing it and seeing how these things work is just fascinating to me. And it's relationships, right? Because you talk in the ear of legislators and you're building these relationships. Tell me a little bit about that. How do you build that?
Yeah, relationships are critical. I have to tell you, it's probably the most important part of the legislative aspect of what we do. And you mentioned sort of going up and meeting legislators. That's really important. But on the flip side, it's really important too to get the legislators out to you.
Yes.
So one of the things we've tried to do is get some of these state senators, state representatives, and also congressmen to come visit a trucking company, sit down and talk to the owner, listen to some of the concerns and the challenges that they have, because everyone knows there's lots of them in the industry.
Plenty.
There's plenty to talk about. So That has been very successful. We started having legislative events a couple of years ago where we'll do just that. We'll find a member who's willing to host an event, and we'll invite all the local lawmakers to come sit down and talk to PMTA members and try to get the room full and just have a conversation. And that has gone so well. I've been so pleased because we built a lot of really good relationships that way. One event that we had out in Western Pennsylvania a few years ago, I actually was up on the Hill at a hearing or something talking to a state representative who was at that particular hearing. And he said, oh, hey, I'm so glad I got to come to that meeting. I called, the gentleman that I met there, and he was telling me all about, this issue that I had a concern with, and he actually came on site and we talked. And so that's the kind of relationship that we really need. And we need, it's a complicated industry, trucking. And the lawmakers that we're trying to advocate and educate about the industry, most of them don't know the first thing about it. So it really is an education, and look at it as you're trying to educate a decision maker, a policy maker that's making policies in Harrisburg or in Washington for your industry. And if they don't know the first thing about your industry, how are they going to make good decisions?
Exactly.
So it's a matter of educating them and then being available to answer questions.
Yes.
So we're just trying to make links between our membership and be a resource where we can provide information for the policymakers from our membership,
right?
So that we get good policy out of Harrisburg and Washington.
And I'm curious too, because you took over the role during really the midst of the pandemic. What was it like? Obviously, you probably couldn't go in person to build these relationships, or whether it's the mask mandates or whatever, or even, maybe there was a sympathetic ear for the trucking industry because they realized how needed it was getting stuff into grocery stores and things like that. What was the pandemic like with that?
Yeah, so I started in February of 2021. So we were just coming out of the pandemic. Right. We did have our membership conference virtually that year, which was tough. I think we all found that really tough because we work in an industry that generally does not work remotely.
Right.
So all of us sort of struggle with that. But we really tried to have in-person events as soon as we possibly could. So we did have legislative events in person that year. We did, I traveled out as soon as I started going out and meeting companies and meeting owners and learning about the industry and talking with folks about it. So I just really tried to dive in, and we tried to get up and running as quickly as we could after the pandemic. But to your point, I think that the pandemic, if there was anything good to come out of it, really did shine a light on truck drivers, supply chains. I mean, you can't talk to anybody anymore who doesn't have an opinion about supply chains or understand supply chains and appreciate truck drivers. And I hope that doesn't go away anytime soon.